Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The voices around her carried weight, gruff tones, clipped sentences, maps being shuffled across the surface, fingers tapping at grid coordinates. But her presence felt invisible. She sat still, eyes steady, the notepad in front of her untouched, pen resting between her fingers like a blade she hadn't decided to draw. It wasn't the first time. In rooms like these, silence had always been her shield, and maybe that's why none of them could see what she was carrying. Not yet. The commander's hand slammed on the table, a sound that echoed like gunfire. "We move before dawn." His voice was sharp, decisive, cutting through the murmur of men who had already made up their minds. But there was something she hadn't told them, something that could change the way this mission ended. She drew a slow breath, and for a moment the sound of her pulse was louder than their voices. They spoke of terrain, of insurgent positions, of supply routes that had already bled too many lives. They didn't speak of the silence after, the silence only she seemed to carry. The silence of names carved on stone. She adjusted her chair, the faint scrape catching the eye of one soldier across the table. He gave her a look, quick, dismissive, like a man glancing at a shadow on the wall. He didn't know. None of them did. Her role on the mission was written in ink. Sniper, recon, eyes in the dark, the one who stayed still while the world moved, the one who pulled the trigger before anyone else even saw the threat. But her reason for being here wasn't written anywhere. That part belonged only to her. The room emptied slowly after the briefing. Boots scuffed against the concrete floor, men adjusted their vests, strapped knives to their belts. She stayed behind, letting the others pass, her hands resting flat on the table. The map in front of her stared back like a wound refusing to close. One of the sergeants paused at the door. "You'll keep up." His voice carried no malice, only doubt, and maybe that was worse. She met his eyes, steady, calm. "I'll be there before you are." He smirked, shook his head, and left. Alone now, she allowed herself the smallest exhale. It wasn't anger that burned in her chest. It was memory. The rain had been falling that night, the night her brother never came back. He had worn the same uniform, carried the same weapon, walked into the same dirt she was about to step into. And when the news reached her, the silence had drowned her long before the tears could. This mission, they thought it was about cutting off supply chains, about striking first before being struck. But for her, it was about something else. It was about walking into the same storm he had never walked out of, about carrying his name not on her lips but in her steady hands. She rose, slinging her rifle across her shoulder. The weight felt natural, familiar, a shadow of the past pressed into the present. Outside, the air was cool, almost tender, though the sky carried no softness. The camp buzzed with movement, men laughing too loud, some muttering curses at equipment that wouldn't fit, others whispering prayers under their breath. She watched them in silence. Every soldier wore a mask, every mask hiding something fragile. One of the younger ones, barely 20, sat on a crate, fumbling with a photo. She slowed as she passed him, eyes flicking to the small image. A woman and a child, both smiling. He noticed her glance, quickly shoved the photo into his pocket. His cheeks burned with embarrassment. "First deployment?" she asked, voice low, steady. He hesitated, then nodded. "First one this far in." She said nothing more, but her silence wasn't empty. Sometimes the absence of words carried more weight than speeches. He seemed to relax slightly, shoulders dropping, as if her stillness had reminded him he wasn't alone in his fear. Fear, she knew it well. Not the kind that made your hands shake, but the kind that hollowed you out, left you breathing, walking, even smiling, but never whole. The night crept over the camp with the patience of a hunter. Stars dimmed behind a veil of clouds. Orders moved through the air like whispers carried by wind. When the trucks finally rumbled to life, she climbed into the back with the others. Metal groaned under weight, boots thudded against steel. She sat in the corner, back pressed to the wall, rifle laid across her knees. No one spoke much during the ride. Engines filled the silence, headlights cut through dust. Faces shifted in the glow, some hardened, some pale. She closed her eyes, letting the hum of machinery blur the noise. But her mind didn't rest. She saw her brother again, not the soldier, but the boy chasing kites across fields, his laughter carried by wind. She saw his hand reaching back for hers, telling her to keep up, to not fall behind. And she remembered the day she had promised him she would always follow. Always. The truck lurched, dragging her back to the present. She opened her eyes. The road ahead was narrow, winding into shadows that seemed alive. They dismounted in silence. The ground was rough, the air heavy with damp earth and distant smoke. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Somewhere further, something exploded, the sound muffled but sharp enough to remind them all what waited ahead. The unit split into teams. Her place was clear. She moved with the forward reconnaissance. Low steps, eyes scanning, every sound dissected. The night pressed close. Leaves whispered under boots, branches trembled above. She felt the world narrowing, every sense sharpened to a knife's edge. Then it came, a faint sound, almost nothing, but not nothing. The shift of weight, the slide of metal against fabric. She froze. The others kept moving, unaware. Her hand lifted slowly, a silent signal, stop. The squad halted, eyes turning back. Confusion flickered in their faces. She didn't move. Her breath slowed, ears straining against the silence. There it was again, softer, closer. She raised her scope, sight sweeping the darkness. Trees stood still, shadows stretched thin. Then a glint, barely visible, metal, waiting. Her finger tightened. A shot cracked the night. The sound was sudden, violent, shattering the quiet like glass. The men flinched, ducked low. She remained steady, eyes through the scope. The figure slumped, rifle clattering to the ground. But it wasn't relief that filled her. It was silence again, heavy, unforgiving. They looked at her now, not with dismissal, but with something else. Maybe respect, maybe fear. She lowered her rifle, gaze fixed on the darkness ahead. This was only the beginning. And there was still something she hadn't told them. Not yet. She stood still in the aftermath of the shot, the night pressing against her skin like a second uniform. The silence that followed wasn't victory. It was weight, a reminder that every bullet carried a shadow. The squad moved again, slower this time, eyes sharper, breaths quieter. But as they advanced, she couldn't shake the image of the man she had dropped. She hadn't seen his face, only the blur of his body falling, the sound of his rifle striking stone. And yet in her mind he wore her brother's features. Why did every death return to him? Her boots sank slightly into the damp ground as she moved. The terrain was changing, thicker brush, steeper inclines. Ahead the lead man signaled to halt. They crouched low, eyes sweeping the darkness. She scanned with her scope, breath calm, hand steady. But inside she felt that hollow ache again, the one she never allowed to surface. The commander whispered, half a click out, we split here, she takes overwatch. Her role was clear. She moved alone, separating from the others, climbing the ridge in silence. The ground was uneven, rocks slick with moisture, but her body moved with practiced grace. She had done this before, too many times. At the top she settled into position, rifle extended, eye to scope. The world narrowed to a tunnel of sight, every detail sharpened. The outpost below came into view, dim lights, crude structures, shadows moving in patterns too careless for soldiers, too practiced for civilians. Her finger hovered near the trigger. She breathed, slow, steady, counting seconds like heartbeats. Then she saw him. Not her target, not her mission. Just a boy no older than 12 carrying a crate too heavy for his frame. His shoulders hunched, his face strained. He stumbled, nearly dropped it, then adjusted and kept walking. Her throat tightened. She shifted her scope away, forcing herself back to the objective. But the boy lingered in her vision as if burned there. She whispered under her breath, almost soundless, "Go home." Her earpiece crackled. "You see anything?" Her voice was even measured. 2 sentries east corner, 1 patrol near the west shack, movement inside. She didn't mention the boy. Some things didn't belong on radio waves. Minutes bled into hours. The team moved below, ghosts in the brush, while she watched from above. Each shift of shadow, each flicker of light, every sound of boots on gravel, she marked them all. But beneath the professional focus, her thoughts wandered back, to her brother, to that night, to the way the officer had delivered the news without looking her in the eye. He was brave, they had said. He died serving. He didn't suffer. Empty words, words meant to patch wounds that would never close. She had asked once how it happened. The silence that followed was louder than any answer could have been. Now lying in the dirt, scope pressed to her eye, she realized the silence had never left. It lived in her bones, breathed with her lungs, carried her steps. And maybe, just maybe, this mission was her way of breaking it. A hand touched her shoulder. She flinched, nearly swinging her rifle. It was Ramirez, one of the forward scouts. His face was tight, jaw clenched, eyes darting. "We've got movement, reinforcements coming in from the south road." She adjusted her scope, scanning. Dust kicked up in the distance, faint headlights weaving through the dark. Trucks, armed, too many. "Hold position," she whispered. But Ramirez shook his head. "They'll outnumber us. We need to move now." Her finger tapped against the rifle stock, a quiet rhythm. She weighed options, felt the seconds slipping. Retreat meant survival. Staying meant a fight they might not win. And yet if they left, the supply chain would remain intact. Her brother's death would mean nothing. She looked at Ramirez. His lips parted as if to argue again, but something in her eyes silenced him. He swallowed hard, nodded once, and slipped back down the ridge. Her voice crackled through the comms. "Incoming reinforcements, 3 trucks, South Road, 20, maybe more." Static, then the commander's reply. "Copy, hold your ground, we finish this." She exhaled. The decision was made. The minutes stretched thin, tension coiling in every muscle. She adjusted her sights, lining up with the first truck. Breath steady, pulse slow. When she fired, the shot cut clean through the night. The truck veered, tires screaming, metal grinding against stone before it slammed sideways. Dust erupted, men spilled out, shouts pierced the dark. Chaos ignited. Gunfire roared, sharp and merciless. Tracers carved red lines through the night. The team below opened fire, their silhouettes flashing in muzzle bursts. She picked off targets one by one, each pull of the trigger precise, mechanical, detached. But war was never detached. Through the scope she saw faces. A man clutching his chest, eyes wide with disbelief. Another crawling for cover, mouth open in a silent scream. She fired again, and again. Each shot a piece of herself torn away. The boy reappeared. She saw him dart from a shack, eyes wild, arms flailing as if searching for someone. Her chest constricted. She shifted her aim away, heart hammering. "Focus," she whispered to herself. The fight raged on. Minutes felt endless. Her rifle grew hot, her body pressed flat against the ground, every muscle taut. She didn't think of survival, she thought of silence, of ending it. Finally, the last echoes of gunfire faded. Smoke lingered, acrid and heavy. The outpost was burning, flames licking at the sky. Bodies lay scattered, shadows crumpled. Her earpiece crackled. "All clear, we've got it." She lowered her rifle, fingers trembling now that the fight was over. Her cheek left the stock, imprint of metal pressed into her skin. She stared at the burning structures, the dark shapes within. And then she saw him again. The boy, kneeling beside one of the fallen, shaking his small hands against the still body, sobbing into the smoke. Her vision blurred, not from the smoke, from something deeper. She forced herself to stand, every movement heavy. When she rejoined the others, no one spoke. Their faces were streaked with grime, eyes hollow. Ramirez avoided her gaze. The commander gave a nod, curt, businesslike, as if the night hadn't swallowed pieces of them whole. They began moving out, steps dragging, weapons slung low. But she lingered for just a moment. She turned her head back toward the burning outpost, flames still clawing at the dark. The boys' cries were faint now, carried by the wind. She whispered something no one else heard. "I'm sorry." And she walked away. The night swallowed the sound of her steps, but the silence she carried only grew heavier. She walked through the dark like a ghost. The fire behind them painted the horizon in cruel shades of orange, but ahead there was only shadow, only silence. The squad moved with heavy steps, weapons dragging against straps, shoulders bowed from more than just weight. Her own steps were measured, steady, but inside the chaos hadn't ended. The boy's cry still rang in her ears, louder than the gunfire had been. It clawed at her chest, tore through the calm she wore on her face. She wanted to shut it out. She couldn't. Why did that sound feel more dangerous than bullets? The commander raised a hand. The line halted. They crouched low, listening. The night was thick, filled with the kind of quiet that hides things. Her finger brushed the trigger guard, her eyes sweeping the tree line. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. The commander whispered, "We rest here, 30 minutes, stay sharp." The men slumped down, backs against rocks and trees, some lighting cigarettes with trembling hands. Smoke curled upward, merging with the night. Others pulled out canteens, water sloshing against metal, lips cracking as they drank. She didn't sit. She moved a little apart, finding higher ground. Her rifle rested across her knees, her gaze locked on the distance. She didn't want water, didn't want smoke. She wanted silence, but the wrong kind of silence had followed her. Ramirez came up behind her, sitting down without asking. He ran a hand over his face, leaving streaks of grime. His breathing was uneven, chest rising too fast. For a while he said nothing. Then, "You saved us." Her eyes didn't leave the horizon. "We all saved each other." He gave a hollow laugh. "Don't do that. Don't act like you didn't carry half the fight yourself." She didn't answer. Ramirez leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice lowered. "You ever think about it, the faces, the ones you drop?" Her chest tightened, but her tone stayed even. "Every day." He nodded slowly, as if he had expected her answer. "Yeah, me too." For a moment he looked like he wanted to say more. His lips parted, eyes flicking toward her, then away again. But instead he just muttered, "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be worse." He walked back down, leaving her with the dark. Rest. The word felt foreign. She hadn't slept properly in days, weeks, maybe longer. Every time her eyes closed, she saw her brother, not alive, not whole, but broken on the ground, a silence thicker than death wrapping around him. She pressed her palms against her face, the grit scraping her skin. No tears came. They hadn't come in years. Something rustled in the brush below. Her hands moved instinctively, rifle snapping up, scope sweeping the shadows, heart quickening, breath caught. But it wasn't the enemy. It was one of their own, the youngest, the boy she had seen earlier with the photograph. He stumbled into view, clutching his canteen, looking pale. She lowered her rifle, but her eyes stayed on him. "You're out of position." He froze, startled by her voice. "I couldn't sleep." His voice was small, carrying a tremor he tried to hide. She studied him for a moment, then tilted her head toward the ridge beside her. "Sit." He obeyed quickly, like a child afraid of scolding. His hands fidgeted with the canteen. Silence stretched, heavy but not hostile. Finally he whispered, "How do you do it? How do you stay steady?" Her throat felt tight. She wanted to tell him she didn't. That every shot cracked her open a little more, every mission hollowed her deeper. But she couldn't say that, not to him. Instead she asked, "Who's in the photo?" His eyes widened, then softened. "My wife and our daughter, she just turned 2. She nodded slowly. "That's how you stay steady. You remember what you're carrying." He swallowed, blinking fast as if holding back something. Then he whispered, "I'm scared I won't make it back to them." Her chest ached. She turned her gaze back to the horizon. "We're all scared of that." He looked at her, eyes shining in the dim light. "Are you?" She paused. For the first time, she let a crack show in her voice. "Every second." The boy didn't reply, but he seemed to breathe easier, as if her admission gave him permission to feel human. When he left, she sat in silence again, the words replaying in her head. Every second. The 30 minutes passed. The commander gave the order to move. The squad rose, stretching stiff limbs, adjusting straps. Boots shifted against dirt. She fell into step with them, rifle across her chest, eyes scanning the dark. The march was long, each step dragging heavier than the last. The forest closed in around them, trees like black sentinels. The air smelled of smoke and damp earth, of something burning far away. Hours passed. The sky began to pale, a thin gray bleeding into the horizon. Dawn was coming, and with it, exposure. They reached a clearing, the grass wet with dew, the silence almost unnatural. The commander raised a fist. "Halt." She crouched, rifle up, eyes scanning. Something was wrong. She felt it in her chest before she saw it. Then she saw it. Tracks, fresh ones, not theirs. Her stomach turned cold. She whispered into her comms, "We're not alone." The words had barely left her lips when the first shot rang out. It tore past her ear, slammed into the dirt behind her. The squad scattered, hitting the ground, weapons up. Shouts filled the air, gunfire cracking from the tree line. Ambush. She rolled behind a fallen log, scope sweeping. Figures moved in the shadows, rifles flashing. She took a breath, fired. One down, another, but they were too many. The boy, the young soldier, screamed. She whipped her scope toward him. He was hit, clutching his leg, dragging himself through the mud. Her heart jolted. She fired again, covering him, bullets snapping past her head. He crawled toward cover, face twisted in pain. Her chest tightened. She couldn't lose him, not him. Not when she still carried her brother's ghost. She slid from cover, sprinting low, mud splashing under her boots. Bullets tore the air, the world exploding in sound. She reached him, grabbed his vest, yanked him behind the log. His face was pale, lips trembling. Blood seeped through his pants, staining the earth. He gasped, "I can't, I can't." Her hand pressed firm against his wound, eyes fierce. "You can, you will, do you hear me?" His eyes locked on hers, wide, desperate. She didn't blink, didn't let him see the fear clawing inside her. Gunfire raged around them, the squad pinned, shouts lost in chaos. She stayed low, rifle tucked, hand steady on his leg. Then something shifted. A memory. Her brother lying in blood, no one there to hold him, no one to tell him he wasn't alone. Her throat tightened, tears threatened but didn't fall. This time, she would not let silence have the last word. She leaned close, her voice low, fierce. "You're not alone. Do you understand? Not now, not ever." The boy's breathing slowed. His eyes stayed on hers. For a moment, the chaos around them blurred. And in that moment, she realized something. She wasn't just fighting for her brother anymore. She was fighting for every soldier who thought they would be forgotten. The silence had followed her for years, but maybe, just maybe, she could break it. The commander's voice shouted through the comms, "Push forward, take the flank." She pulled her rifle back up, eyes hard, movements precise. The fight wasn't over. It was only beginning. The ground shook with gunfire, each shot a hammer against her chest. Dirt sprayed around her, leaves shredded into the air. She pressed harder on the boy's wound, her palm slick with blood. His breathing came in shallow bursts, each one a plea against the silence trying to claim him. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice more command than comfort. He nodded weakly, teeth clenched, eyes wide with the kind of fear you never forget. She remembered that look. She had seen it once before on her brother. Bullets cracked overhead. Ramirez's voice shouted through the chaos. "We're pinned, flanks too strong." Her mind raced. The squad couldn't stay locked here, not in the open, not while reinforcements could close in. She scanned through the smoke and muzzle flashes, searching for leverage. Then she saw it, a narrow ridge running along the tree line higher ground. If she could get there, she could break the chokehold. But moving meant leaving him. Her chest tightened. The boy's hand clutched her wrist, weak but desperate. Don't leave me." She leaned close, forcing steel into her voice. "I'll come back, but if I don't move, none of us make it out." His lips trembled, but he nodded. Trust, raw and fragile, passed between them. She slid his hand from her wrist, pressed it against his wound. "Hold here, no matter what, hold." Then she was moving, low, fast, dirt caking her face as bullets tore past. She felt each impact in the ground like thunder, but her body moved on instinct, cutting between shadows, rifle tight against her chest. She hit the base of the ridge, scrambling upward, fingers digging into rock, boots slipping on loose earth. Every sound felt amplified, the rattle of ammo, the hiss of her breath, the scream of ricochets. At the top, she threw herself flat, rifle up, scope locking onto the enemy line. Her breath slowed, her world narrowed. One shot, a man dropped. Another. She adjusted, fired again. The pressure on her squad lessened, their voices rising in counterfire. But her focus sharpened beyond just killing. She scanned their movements, anticipating patterns, breaking momentum. She wasn't just shooting, she was dismantling. Ramirez's voice cracked through comms. "We've got room, push." The squad surged forward, breaking the ambush. Grenades thudded, explosions ripped through brush, smoke swallowed the night. She kept firing, covering their advance. The enemy line faltered, men breaking into retreat. Then silence fell, the kind that wasn't victory but aftermath. She lowered her rifle, chest heaving. Her arms ached, her cheek raw from the scope, but her mind was clear. She slid down the ridge, boots skidding, landing hard at the bottom. Her first thought was the boy. She sprinted back to where she had left him, heart hammering. For a moment, panic clawed her chest. What if she was too late? But he was there, pale, trembling, but alive. His hand still pressed against his wound, just as she had ordered. His eyes lifted, glassy with pain but holding on. She knelt beside him, relief washing through her like cold water. "You did good." He tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. "Save it," she whispered. "Keep your strength." Ramirez appeared, sweat and dirt streaking his face. He crouched, checking the boy's wound. His expression tightened. "He won't last long without medevac." The commander's voice cut in sharp. "No medevac, too hot, we move him with us." Her jaw clenched. The boy wouldn't survive a march. She knew it. Ramirez knew it. The commander knew it. But orders were orders, and orders didn't bend for one soldier. Still, she couldn't let it go. She looked at Ramirez, her voice low. "We carry him." Ramirez hesitated, then nodded. Together they lifted him, his weight awkward, his groans muffled into their shoulders. They fell into step with the squad, boots dragging, breaths ragged. Each step was a reminder of the weight she carried, of the promise she had made. She wouldn't let this boy become another ghost. The march was brutal. The forest thickened, branches clawing at faces and gear. The smell of blood clung to the air, mixed with sweat and gunpowder. She felt the boy weaken in her arms, his breathing shallow, his head lolling. She whispered in his ear, words she didn't even know she had. "You're not going anywhere. Do you hear me? Not tonight. Not while I'm here." Her mind slipped back again, unbidden, to her brother, to the night he hadn't come home. No one had been there to carry him. No one had whispered promises into the silence. Her throat tightened. This was her chance to rewrite that ending, to keep the silence from winning. The squad finally halted in a ravine, shielded by jagged rock. The commander barked orders, securing perimeter, checking ammo. Men slumped against stone, exhaustion carving deep lines into their faces. She lowered the boy gently onto the ground. His face was gray, lips cracked. Ramirez tore open a med kit, hands working fast, pressing gauze, tightening tourniquets. But it wasn't enough. The commander approached, his voice clipped. "He won't make it. We can't slow the mission." She rose, her eyes locking onto his. "We don't leave him." His jaw tightened. For a moment, silence hung heavy as stone. Then he said, "You think this is about him? We've got bigger stakes. One life doesn't outweigh the mission." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. She wanted to scream, to tear the words from his mouth, but she held it in, her voice steady, sharp. "Then you don't understand what we're fighting for." He glared at her but didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked away, muttering into his radio. She crouched again beside the boy, brushing dirt from his face. His eyes flickered open, unfocused. Am I going home?" he whispered. Her chest fractured. She forced a smile, soft but unyielding. "Yes, you're going home." His lips curved, the ghost of a smile, before his eyes slipped shut. She froze, pressed her hand to his neck, a pulse, faint, fragile, still there. Her breath shuddered out. "Not yet, not today." Ramirez's hand gripped her shoulder. "He's holding on because of you." She shook her head, whispering more to herself than to him. "He's holding on because he has something waiting. That's what keeps him alive." Ramirez studied her, eyes narrowing slightly. "And you, what keeps you alive?" She looked away, jaw tight. The silence answered for her. But in her chest, the truth whispered. "My brother, the promise I couldn't keep, the silence I can't escape." The squad settled into uneasy rest, some dozing against rocks, others cleaning weapons with trembling hands. The forest pressed close, shadows heavy, the air thick with the stench of blood and smoke. She sat awake, rifle across her lap, eyes scanning the dark. But her mind wasn't on the tree line. It was on the boy, on her brother, on the weight she had never spoken aloud. There was something she hadn't told them. Not Ramirez, not the commander, not anyone. And when they found out, everything would change. The night did not rest. Even when the guns had gone silent, the forest kept whispering, its voice heavy with threats. Branches creaked under unseen weight, wind threaded through leaves like breath against the back of her neck. She sat awake, rifle resting across her knees, eyes burning holes into the dark. Sleep was not an option, not when every shadow felt alive, not when the boy's life slipped further away with each shallow breath. Ramirez had dozed off beside him, head tilted against the stone wall of the ravine. But she remained still, her senses tuned sharp, waiting for the inevitable, the next wave, the next order, the next test of how much she could carry before she broke. She told herself she would not break, not again. But the silence gave her no mercy. It dragged her back to the night she had tried to bury for years. A farmhouse, a sky blackened with smoke, the sound of boots pounding on wooden floors, and her brother laughing one last time, even as they dragged him away. She had never seen him again. Her fist tightened on the rifle. She had promised herself then, if she couldn't save him, she would save whoever she could. Every soldier she pulled from the jaws of silence was one more act of defiance against that night, against fate itself. Now here was this boy, clinging to life because she refused to let go. And yet she knew the truth. Her will alone wouldn't keep him alive forever. The commander's voice snapped her back to the present. He was speaking into his radio, tone hushed but firm. She could make out fragments, extraction, enemy numbers, secondary target. Her stomach sank. This wasn't just survival. There was another mission layered beneath the one they thought they had. When he turned, she caught the look in his eyes, cold, calculated, like the boy wasn't even there. She rose and intercepted him, voice low but hard. "He can't be moved again tonight. He needs rest." The commander's jaw twitched. "You think I don't know that, but command just shifted our objective. We move at dawn." Her breath caught, shifted to what? He didn't answer immediately. His gaze held hers, weighing whether she deserved the truth. Finally, he leaned closer. This mission isn't what you think. The ambush wasn't random. They were waiting. Someone gave us up. Her stomach dropped. The squad had been sold out. Her mind raced. Who? How? But more than suspicion, anger surged. These men had carried each other through fire, trusted each other with their lives. The idea that one of them had betrayed the rest was poison in her veins. She lowered her voice, sharp as glass. And you think dragging a half-dead soldier through the forest will keep us alive? The commander's eyes hardened. I think you need to remember your place, sniper. One life does not outweigh the mission. Her pulse spiked, words burning on her tongue. She wanted to scream that it did, that it always did, but she bit it back, not yet, not here. Instead, she turned away, crouched beside the boy again, brushing a hand against his hair. His skin was fever-hot, his lips cracked. Ramirez stirred, watching her with heavy eyes. What'd he say? She shook her head. Nothing that matters. But the truth clawed at her. It mattered more than either of them knew. Dawn came cruelly, bleeding through the trees in pale streaks of gray. The squad roused, exhausted men dragging themselves upright, shouldering packs, checking weapons with mechanical motions. She and Ramirez lifted the boy again, his weight heavier now as though each step siphoned the last of his strength. His head lolled, breath shallow, but still, he clung. The forest swallowed them as they moved, their boots sinking into damp earth, the smell of moss and blood thick in the air. Birds shrieked overhead, startled into flight. Every sound felt amplified as though the forest itself wanted them gone. Hours dragged, muscles screamed. The boy's moans grew weaker, fading into silence. At one point, Ramirez faltered, almost dropping him. She caught his weight, teeth gritted, refusing to let him fall. She whispered in his ear again, words she barely believed. Home, just a little further, you're going home. But inside, doubt gnawed her hollow. She had promised before, to her brother, to herself. And promises hadn't stopped death then. By midday, the squad reached the ruins of a village, abandoned, its houses gutted, walls blackened with fire. Windows gaped like empty sockets, doors hung broken. The smell of rot clung to everything, a reminder of what war left behind. The commander ordered a halt. Men slumped into the ruins, grateful for the chance to breathe. She and Ramirez lowered the boy into the shade of a crumbling wall. His chest rose faintly, each breath fragile but alive. She brushed dirt from his cheek, her voice soft. You're still here, that's enough. Ramirez crouched beside her, shaking his head. I don't know how much longer. She didn't answer, she couldn't. The commander called them in, voice sharp. Briefing now. Reluctantly, she left the boy's side and joined the circle. The commander's eyes swept the squad, cold and direct. Change of mission. Our primary objective is gone. New orders are clear. We secure intel from a forward enemy outpost. High value, non-negotiable. The squad murmured uneasily. They were battered, low on ammo, carrying a wounded soldier who might not survive another mile. And yet here was another mission, layered on their backs like fresh stone. Her voice cut in, quiet but firm. He won't make it if we push again. The commander's glare snapped to her. And if we don't, more than one life is lost. We're soldiers, not caretakers. Her fists tightened, nails biting her palms. Rage threatened to spill, but Ramirez's hand brushed her arm, steadying, grounding. She bit down the words, though they burned in her throat. The squad dispersed, each man preparing in silence. She lingered by the boy, her shadow falling across him. His lips moved faintly, whispering something she barely caught. Don't leave me. Her chest fractured all over again. She crouched close, pressing her forehead to his. I won't, I swear it. But even as she said it, doubt clawed her. The commander wouldn't wait. The mission wouldn't wait. And soon she would be forced to choose. Ramirez watched her, his voice low. You can't save everyone. She looked at him, eyes burning. Then I'll save the ones I can. He studied her for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Finally, he nodded, as though he understood. The sun climbed higher, the heat pressing down like a weight. The ruins shimmered, ghosts of what once was etched into every broken wall. She felt the eyes of the squad on her, some with sympathy, others with suspicion. And beneath it all, the commander's warning echoed in her head. Someone gave us up. The thought gnawed at her as much as the boy's shallow breaths. Betrayal from within, secrets within secrets. She carried her own, but whose silence had condemned them all. The answer would come, she could feel it, and when it did, blood would follow. Why did the silence feel heavier than the gunfire had? The squad pressed deeper into the ruined village, boots crunching over broken glass, rifles raised, eyes cutting from window to window. No voices, no footsteps, only the echo of their own breathing. It felt wrong, too quiet, like the village was holding its breath, waiting for them to discover something they weren't meant to. She kept the boy cradled close to her side with Ramirez's help, his head tucked against her chest. Each breath was shallow, a flicker on the edge of nothing. His skin burned hot, his pulse erratic. She counted each beat in silence, terrified of when the rhythm would falter. But it wasn't just his failing body that pressed against her ribs. It was the commander's words, circling like wolves. Someone gave us up. She scanned the faces of the men around her, their weariness, their silent focus. Who among them had sold them to the enemy? Who carried that secret like a hidden knife? And worse, would it cut them again before this was over? They reached the far edge of the village, where a dirt road split into the forest beyond. The commander raised his hand. The squad halted. Through the trees, barely visible in the distance, smoke rose in a thin spiral. The outpost. Her breath caught. That was their target. That was where command wanted them to go. But she knew what lay between them and that smoke. Hours of treacherous ground, patrols, ambushes, and the boy he wouldn't survive the journey. The commander signaled them closer, voice low but firm. We move in two teams, recon and carrier. Recon pushes ahead, secures a path. Carrier stays with the wounded until the way is clear. She bristled. Carrier, you mean us? His eyes cut to hers. You volunteered the moment you refused to let him go. Her fists clenched, but she said nothing. He was right. She wouldn't abandon the boy, no matter what it cost. Ramirez leaned in, whispering just for her. They'll use us as bait, you know that. Her jaw tightened. She did know. A slow burn coiled in her chest, but she swallowed it. If bait was what kept him alive another hour, she would take the hook herself. The squad split, shadows merging into the trees. She and Ramirez adjusted the boy's weight, each step an agony of patience. The forest floor seemed endless, every twig a threat, every bird call a warning. Hours blurred. Sweat stung her eyes, muscles screaming. Still, she moved. Still, she whispered promises in the boy's ear she wasn't sure she could keep. You'll see home again, you'll see light. A crack split the air, not a twig, not the forest, a rifle shot. She dropped instantly, dragging the boy down with her, heart hammering. Bullets tore through branches, splintering bark inches from her face. Ambush, Ramirez roared, firing blind into the trees. The forest erupted. Gunfire shredded the silence, echoing between trunks. Shadows moved, enemy soldiers fanning out, rifles flashing. She pulled the boy tight against her body, shielding him as bullets screamed past. Her rifle was within reach. She grabbed it, sighting down the scope through the chaos. One shot, a flash of red, another target down. Her breath steadied with each squeeze of the trigger, her world narrowing to crosshairs and the faint recoil against her shoulder. But they were outnumbered. The enemy pressed closer, their shouts cutting through the gunfire. Ramirez ducked behind a fallen log, teeth bared. We can't hold this. Her mind raced. They were exposed, pinned, the boy bleeding into her shirt. The squad was nowhere in sight. Then another crack. But not from her or Ramirez, from behind the enemy line. Figures burst through the trees. Their squad. Recon had circled back, flanking the ambushers. Gunfire poured into enemy ranks, dropping men where they stood. Within minutes, the forest fell silent again. Bodies crumpled among roots and leaves. The smell of gunpowder and blood thickened the air. She lowered her rifle, chest heaving. Her ears rang with the echo of violence, her hands trembling. The commander strode through the wreckage, eyes sweeping the field. Status. Boy still breathing, Ramirez said, though his voice cracked. Her grip tightened on the boy's shirt. She looked up at the commander, fury sparking. You knew this would happen. He didn't flinch. I suspected, and now it's clear the leak is real. They knew our path. Her voice shook with anger. You risked him, you risked all of us. The commander's eyes hardened. This is war. Risk is constant. Question is, are you willing to face what comes next? She held his gaze, silence like a blade between them. She wanted to say no. She wanted to scream. But the boy's breath whispered against her collarbone, fragile and fleeting. And so she stayed silent. The squad pressed on. By dusk, they reached the outskirts of the outpost, a cluster of wooden structures ringed by barbed wire, smoke rising from chimneys. Enemy voices carried faintly through the trees, laughter mingling with the clatter of dishes. It looked almost ordinary, almost human. But they all knew better. The commander gathered them, voice low. We breach at nightfall. Objective is inside, the intel we need. Silent, fast, no mistakes. Her stomach twisted. Silent, fast, two words that didn't exist in their condition. The boy couldn't move another step. Ramirez was limping, and every man bore the weight of exhaustion. But orders were orders. She crouched with Ramirez, laying the boy gently against a tree trunk. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy and weak. He tried to speak, but no sound came. She squeezed his hand, whispering, "Rest, just rest." Ramirez muttered, bitterness in his tone. They'll send us in like ghosts. Some of us won't come back. She looked at him. Then we make damn sure it means something. The night thickened. Darkness fell like a curtain, the forest alive with crickets and the distant murmur of enemy guards. The squad moved into position, shadows blending with shadows. She adjusted her rifle, breath steady, scope catching slivers of light. She marked patrol routes, memorized rhythms, calculated shots. The world slowed to her heartbeat, her focus narrowing to a single truth. One mistake and they all died. Her finger brushed the trigger, crosshairs following a guard's lazy walk. She whispered to herself, not a prayer, not a plea, but a promise. For him, for all of them, for the brother I couldn't save. A crack split the night. The first guard fell, and the storm began. What did courage look like in the dark? The question gnawed at her as she lay flat in the grass, staring through the scope at the outpost fence. Barbed wire curled like claws against the night sky. Guard towers loomed, their searchlights sweeping slowly, pausing as if they already suspected someone was watching. Her heartbeat kept time with the beam. Sweep, thump, sweep, thump. Every second stretched too long. The squad moved like shadows around her. The commander's hand raised, fingers sharp against the gloom, signaling positions. She tracked him through her scope, the precision in his movements, the calm etched into his face. He had done this before, too many times. But tonight was different. Someone had betrayed them. That shadow still lingered. And the boy, he was tucked against the roots of a tree just behind them, Ramirez keeping watch. He shouldn't have been breathing anymore, not with how weak he had grown. But somehow, impossibly, he still was. She told herself that meant something, that maybe the universe wasn't ready to snuff him out. Not yet. The commander's hand dropped, the signal. She fired. The guard in the tower slumped. Another shot, another silence. The squad surged forward, cutters working on the wire, boots pressing low to the earth. Every sound was amplified, metal clipping, a grunt muffled by cloth, the faint clatter of gear. Then the sharp bark of a dog. Her stomach clenched. Lights flared across the outpost. shouts in a language that still made her blood run cold. The silence shattered. Gunfire erupted. Muzzles flashed from the towers, spraying the perimeter with bullets. Dirt spat up around her face as she pressed flat to the ground. Her rifle snapped to her shoulder, finding targets in the chaos. One, then another. Her breathing was calm, but inside her chest, fire raged. The squad surged through the gap in the fence, moving like ghosts despite the storm. Grenades burst against walls, wood splintering, smoke rolling through the compound. She advanced, rifle braced, eyes sweeping corners. A soldier rounded a doorway. She fired, his body folding. Another shouted from the rooftop. She dropped him before the echo faded. But the chaos wasn't clean. It never was. Two men went down ahead of her, cut down by crossfire. One screamed, clutching his stomach, his voice breaking into gasps. She lunged forward, but the commander's hand snapped up, stopping her. His voice was steel. "Leave him, move." Her body shook with rage. She wanted to tear free, to drag the wounded man out. But the commander's eyes cut through her, hard and final. She froze. The scream behind her dwindled into silence. Every step forward now felt like betrayal. The squad crashed into the heart of the outpost, a low building lit from within, shadows moving behind curtains. The commander's voice cut low. "That's the target. Intel's inside. We breach." Her finger hovered near the trigger. Intel. The word tasted bitter. What worth was paper, codes, names, when the boy lay outside, clinging to life by threads, when men screamed and bled in the dirt they'd been told to abandon? But the mission swallowed choice. The breach came like thunder. Charges blew the door inward. The squad stormed in, rifles barking, shouts echoing against the walls. Smoke rolled, shadows fell. She moved through the haze, her rifle a steady extension of her will. Hallways stretched narrow, lined with doors, each one a trap waiting to spring. And then she saw it. An office, maps pinned to walls, folders stacked on a desk. The commander swept inside, yanking open drawers, pulling drives, stuffing papers into his pack. It was all happening so fast, too fast. Her chest tightened. None of it made sense. The ambushes, the betrayals, the boy left to die while they bled for scraps of paper. Why? The word tore from her throat before she could choke it back. The commander froze, eyes flicking to her. For the first time, she saw hesitation ripple across his mask. Then he spoke, quiet but sharp. "Because this war isn't about us. It never was. We're pawns, and pawns don't get to choose." The words pierced her like glass. Pawns. That was all her brother had been too, all of them. Her rifle wavered. Anger roared in her veins, but so did despair. Another explosion rocked the compound. Shouts rose from outside, the enemy regrouping, pouring back into the fight. The commander shoved past her, barking orders. "We move now." The squad spilled out into the night, clutching the stolen intel, firing wildly as enemies surged from the tree line. Muzzle flashes painted the dark in fire and red. She fought beside them, her rifle spitting death, but her heart was somewhere else, at the tree line where the boy lay waiting. When they reached him, Ramirez was crouched low, blood streaking his arm. He looked up, relief flashing in his eyes. "He's still with us." She dropped to her knees, hands trembling as she touched the boy's face. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy but alive. But above them, the commander's voice cracked like a whip. "We can't carry him. We move or we die." Something inside her broke. The boy's hand twitched against hers, weak but pleading. She heard her brother's voice in that touch, echoing across years. "Don't leave me." Her eyes snapped to the commander. "I'm not leaving him." The commander's jaw set. "Then you're not coming." Time fractured. The gunfire, the shouts, the chaos, all of it blurred into a single, ringing silence. She looked to Ramirez. He met her eyes, torn, breath heavy. For a heartbeat, she saw him weighing it too: duty, survival, loyalty. Then he nodded. "We don't leave him." The commander's glare was ice. You're choosing sentiment over orders. That will get us all killed." Her voice shook, but the steel in it held. "No, choosing him is the only reason any of this means a damn thing." The words hung between them, sharp as bullets. The commander stared at her, then spat into the dirt. "Fine, but his blood's on you." He turned, signaling the others. Half the squad followed him into the night, their shapes swallowed by trees. The rest lingered, torn, eyes darting between commander and comrade. And just like that, the unit fractured. The gunfire pressed closer. Shadows swarmed from the tree line, their voices sharp, their rifles raised. She pressed the boy tighter against her, whispering fiercely into his ear, "We're not leaving you, not now, not ever." And as the night roared alive again, she realized the truth. This wasn't about nations or orders or intel. It was about one boy, one choice, one promise she refused to break. Even if it killed her. She had never felt silence so heavy. Not on the battlefield, not in the hangar, not even in the dim hospital corridors where she once held her breath waiting for news of the wounded. This silence was different. It was the kind that did not fade with time. The kind that seemed to watch her, measure her, and ask, was it worth it? The night stretched wide over the base, a canvas of stars smudged by smoke trails still rising in the distance. The desert wind carried the faint metallic scent of spent ammunition, mixed with dust that clung to her boots. Her rifle rested across her lap, its weight familiar, its presence almost human. She didn't move, didn't need to. The war inside her was louder than anything beyond the walls. She remembered the sound of his voice, that last radio check before everything collapsed. His laugh had been tired but steady, a small spark of normal in a storm of chaos. And then nothing. Silence where his voice should have been. She had replayed that moment 100 times, searching for some hidden message, some reason she didn't catch, some way she could have changed the ending. But there was none. A shadow passed nearby. One of the younger soldiers, barely more than a boy, hesitated before speaking. His face was pale, lips trembling, hands tucked awkwardly into his vest as if hiding from the world. "Ma'am, we made it, right?" His voice cracked, thin as thread. Looked at him, really looked. He wasn't asking about survival. He wasn't asking about the mission. He was asking about meaning. Whether the blood, the noise, the sacrifices would matter once the dust settled. She wanted to lie. Wanted to tell him the nation already remembered them, that every life lost was etched into history. But her throat closed around the words. Instead, she reached out, placed a steady hand on his shoulder, and gave him the only truth she could manage. "We gave everything we had. That's what will last." His eyes softened just enough. He nodded and walked away. The hangar lights flickered once, a reminder of fragility. Somewhere far across the border, a mother would be waking to an empty bed. A sister would touch a photo on her wall. A father would straighten a folded flag and wonder if pride could ever outweigh grief. She thought of her own mother, her letters unopened in her pack. She had been too afraid to read the last one, fearing the words inside would break her more than the bullets ever could. But the mission had ended. The names of those who didn't return would be spoken in briefings, etched into reports, perhaps carved into stone. And she would walk away carrying their faces, their voices, their unfinished sentences. The storm inside her chest did not ask for applause. It asked for silence, for dignity, for remembrance without fanfare. She tightened her grip on the rifle, feeling the cold steel press into her palm. A soldier's oath was not to be remembered but to remember, to carry those who no longer could. The night gave no answers, only the steady hum of generators, the distant cough of engines, the whisper of sand against steel. But in that silence something shifted. A calm, fragile but real settled over her. Not peace, never peace, but acceptance. She rose slowly, her shadow stretching long across the concrete. The war was not gone, but her part in it had changed. She was no longer the sniper, the unseen protector. She was the witness, the voice that would speak not of victory but of endurance, of the price paid quietly without complaint. And when dawn finally broke, Soft and golden, brushing light across the base, she stood tall against the horizon, alone but unbroken. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And her silence would echo longer than any war.